group. What's that been like over the last couple days as you've gotten these guys acclimated?
Well, I think the one thing that helps is, for the most part, all those things happen in July, so it gives you at least a little bit of time to sit down and talk to the players and develop relationship, talk about, their game, how they fit, just have really good open dialogue and discussion. With Nerlens, I obviously knew him in high school from a recruiting standpoint. Dennis, I didn't really have a relationship with all. Timothy, not at all. Abdul, not at all. So we need time to develop and talk to those guys about their games and the way we do things here and how they can fit in. So that part, gives you a little bit of time to do that. And those guys have been great guys. They're really good people, and they're easy to build a relationship with and talk to.
As you look at this week leading up to Blue White scrimmage, what are some of the most important things that you want to get in with these guys over this time?
Well, I think you got to, I've always just believed you got to get the whole in first, then you got to work on the parts, and then, back to the whole. You got to get stuff in. You can go too slow, and you certainly can go too fast, but I think you've got to go at a pace where you're getting enough in, where you feel like, in a day or two, you can legitimately play 5-on-5 basketball, and they would at least have some, some structure and some fundamentals of how we want to play. Because, basically in a week, we're going to be in our first preseason game. And you want to at least have some time going into that you are scrimmaging and playing 5-on-5 going on the board.
So, Billy, how did things go today on day one?
It was good. The guys did a good job. They came in, worked really hard. I thought we got a good quality work in. I think the one thing that's always hard from a coaching perspective the first day is trying to keep the balance between when you're teaching and you're explaining and introducing new things. You can take away the rhythm of practice and their lather. So you want to kind of be able to teach and move on the fly so they can kind of keep doing what they're doing. But they did a really good job of being able to take in information, concentrate and focus and work.
Billy, Sam said at his press conference that losing Nick Collison was going to be an opportunity for Russell to basically take the next step in his leadership role on the team. And then Russ kind of said that every year he tries to evolve it in different ways with different players, learning about new players. In what ways, since you've been around him a few years now, in what ways does he kind of evolve that leadership role, not necessarily on the court?
Yeah, the one thing that's hard, I think, for people is like when you see Russell play, you think you maybe know the person, so to speak. Obviously he plays with great energy and passion and always leaves it out there physically on the floor. But there's a lot of things that he does behind closed doors, in the locker room, in practice, even at night with guys, where he organizes things for those guys to go to dinner together. I remember, Domas Sabonis' rookie year, it was the first time the two of them were playing and pick and rolls together. And, he told, Domas to meet him at 8:30 in the morning. They were working together. People don't see those kind of things. Even today, him trying to stay engaged, in practice, even though we can't do anything physically, but being out there and staying engaged and trying to talk to guys. There's a lot of things that, a lot of people don't necessarily get a chance to see.
Yeah, is that something that you're confident that the team will be able to basically replace Nick Collison's role as being the glue guy in the locker room, voice in the locker room?
Well, Nick is such a special guy. He really is a unique and special guy, and you hate to sit there and say, okay, this guy or this person's going to replace Nick Collison, because there's only one Nick Collison, and you're not going to replace that. I do think that, from a leadership standpoint, a guy like Russell has invested a lot inside this organization, and as you go through year by year, you learn and grow and you improve, and you find out different things or different techniques that may be better leadership-wise. And I'm sure Russell, in a lot of ways, has grown and seen things in a different way, and probably his relationship with Nick has got a lot to do with that. But, I don't think you want to say to somebody, hey, listen, you need to be Nick Collison, because there's only one Nick, and he was incredible. And I think for Russell, for Andre, for Steven, there's been a lot of investment by those guys. Those guys have been here for a while. So, there's a collective ownership, I think, in that part. But certainly with Russell and his ability to lead, it's just something that I don't think a lot of people get a chance to always see.
Billy, are there some basic things that you like to establish with young guys that you get in a trade? And I think of Jeremy Grant in particular, like when you got him 2 years ago. Are there kind of some things that you like to establish immediately from the first day you knew him?
Yeah, I mean, you want to. I mean, I think the first thing is you got to have open dialogue and you got to talk, because for the player coming in, it's totally new for them. They don't know. They haven't played with a lot of these guys, so I think the first thing you do is you try to at least talk about things, talk about how you see their role, what the things that they're going to need to do to impact our team, what our team maybe can provide, that they have the ability to provide, and how they go about doing that. And I think a lot of times for young players when they go in there, I always look at it and say, what are the things that are going to take you off the floor? Stop thinking about what you want to do or think you can do, and start to think about what are the things that are going to take me off the floor. What are the things that, mistake-wise, that I have control over, that if I can clean up, it's going to give me an opportunity to be out there and help. I think that's for young guys, because I think a lot of times, the initial response for young players, like, I will go out there and show what I can do. Sometimes it's got nothing to do with showing what you can do. It's actually, being consistent on the things you don't want or you don't need to have done. And I think for any young player, there's going to part of the learning curve for them is going through mistakes. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But if they can really think about improvement on mistakes or learning through their mistakes, the quicker they become more and more reliable.
I asked that because you mentioned, I guess, candid conversations you've had with guys in this camp, whether it's like Dennis or whether it's Nerlens. And I think about the progress that Jeremy's made in his 2 years being here. Like, are those conversations beneficial to helping guys make progress? Like when you talk about Nerlens or a guy who's...
Oh yeah, I think so. I think so. I think there's, listen, we're working together, so you got to have communication, you got to have dialogue. I've got to have feedback from them, they got to have feedback from me. There's got to be honest and open, truthful dialogue. I think for in any kind of relationship, you want to be able to do that. And I think the one thing I respect, Jeremy's is a little bit different, because I had a chance to work with Jeremy and coach Jeremy, in the USA for 2 years. So I was around Jeremy, so there's a little bit of a relationship there. So I think starting the both of us had a little bit of history together. So that connection, that bond, or that honesty and truthfulness, you could get there because, again, when you're working together to try to win a gold medal, there's still a level of, there's a goal there, and you're working towards that goal. And I think the same thing's here, just getting to, with Nerlens, talking to him about his career, different things he's experienced, he's went through. What are areas that he feels like maybe he could be better at, that he needs to improve on? What are things that he feels are holding him back as a player? What does he need from a coach? How does he best handle, being coached? All those things are conversations. And obviously, you got to talk about the expectations and, the things that you know and believe go into winning, and try to get those guys to understand those things, understand the vision of those things.
Billy,
So,
with
Andre,
Dennis having been overseas a lot during the summer, how familiar has he been able to get with the playbook, terminology, all that kind of stuff?
Dennis is a really smart player. He picked up things really, really well today. He's really good. He listens. He pays attention. I think as a point guard, he's very cerebral. So I think the hard part for, I think, any player defensively is just getting the coverage. He's been in Atlanta for his entire career, so he's probably become very, very familiar with the with the language, the terminology, things that they use for pick and roll coverages or post defense or trapping. The calls are different, so he's got to learn those kind of things. But he'll pick those things up, and those things just take time to build the habits on it. But he's smart enough that he knows what's going on.
So Andre shooting down there in the corner earlier. What all was he able to do today?
Obviously, we were into contact and into running up and down the floor. So it was really hard for him to do much. I think he did a good job in practice with the guys, like Russell did, just trying to talk to those guys and help them when he can. But again, there's things that he can do, as it relates to shooting and some movement, but there's just certain things he can't do. So he'll continually progress and move closer and closer to being able to play.
Billy, the sort of twin focuses of playing with consistency and then playing with the identity you want them to play with. You talked about it, open and close with it yesterday.
Yep.
What do you do specifically in like a first practice to begin to establish that?
Well, the first thing you want to talk about is what is your identity on defense? What are the things that we're going to value? What's the identity? And then you're building out a system from that. And then the players have got to understand what the responsibilities are to those things, and then you've got to stay true to those things. To build up the kind of identity you want. But yeah, that's the consistency part. Is being consistent to how you want to play, and you're going to make mistakes in how you want to play. Every team does, but it's much more about having that conviction and that belief on the things that we have to do, and then trying to do them at the highest of level that we possibly can.
Can you run through things similarly with Dennis at the point in practice than if you had Russell in there?
With where we were today, the things that we put in, he was fine with that. Now, if I started throwing out terminology to Dennis right now, and Russell was standing there of stuff that I know Dennis doesn't know, Russell would be able to answer that, and Dennis wouldn't be able to. So some of the stuff that went in today, Russell already knew, but Dennis is learning it, but he was able to pick it up. I didn't feel as a coach like, okay, boy, this is really taking a long time for Dennis to pick things up. I was able to go at a normal pace, and I would say all of our guys did a really good job, even the new guys, of retaining the information. I did not feel at all today as a coach like, gosh, I was hoping we could have got through more stuff, but because picking it up, terminology, with the new guys, we got slowed down, but that did not happen at all. We were able to keep, I think, a really good tempo and pace in practice from start to finish.
Stephen mentioned briefly yesterday about Dennis and the way he sets guys up and pick and roll. What do you see there? Stephen thought he had good pace in that just from the little time he's been able to.
Yeah, the one thing that's great, it was interesting because Stephen is such a good pick and roll player, and he understands defense angles and where he wants to go, but it was great watching those two guys communicate together, and they'll communicate and develop a bond and a relationship. But the biggest thing is stuff communication, and just those guys communicating, in big ball situations about, hey, what about this, what about that. So they'll get that worked out. But Dennis plays with really good tempo and really good pace, and he plays maybe a little bit differently than Russell does in pick and roll. And I think he and Steven working through that will be good.